Hello everyone, and welcome to mdo203, Intermediate Modeling and Texturing inside of Modo. My name is Pat Cranley, and I'm going to be your fearless leader over the next 10 weeks as we strive to study the art of subdivision surface modeling and texturing inside of Modo. Our goal over the next 10 weeks is to produce what you see here on the screen, this groovy little treasure chest scene. In addition to creating the foreground object, the treasure chest, we'll also focus our time in creating a cool little environment for our treasure chest to live within. So we'll talk about how to make the sand, the rocks in the background, the trees, and of course, no treasure chest is complete without a little treasure, so we'll also make some gold coins, some goblets, maybe some gems and some rubies, and throw that into our treasure chest as well. We have a lot of work and a lot of information to cover, so let's just jump in and start. Okay, so the first thing that we always want to do when we're modeling anything or starting the modeling process is begin with reference. I'm an old school modeler. I believe that everything that we do should begin and end with reference. It's our job as 3D modelers to recreate reality, and unfortunately you can't see me putting reality in little stupid finger quotes right now. But you know, it's our job to build the objects that's going to populate our world, the world within inside of our frame, the world of our show, the world of our game, what have you. It's a big responsibility, and it's a challenge that begins with reference. Our audience is always going to be is going to be coming to our project with the expectation to see things that they at least understand on a form and material level. So the more that we can infuse in our models that reminds our audience of things that they naturally see out in the real world, the better. So reference is a natural place to begin. Oftentimes, the most difficult thing in any project is understanding the first step. Where do we begin? Do we begin with the top, the bottom, the environment? I don't know, but the reference is sure going to tell us. Now, I know that if you look through some of these images, and the ones, this is a great example. This is very clearly a cake. Reference can come in all shapes and sizes. It gives us an illusion, it gives us a good indication of the illusion that we're going to be crafting here. It shows us volume. It shows us plane, the relationship between the shape and the environment. It also gives us a really good idea of some really awesome details that we can start to infuse along the surface of our geometry. Now, the goal is not to recreate these reference images, but use them as a launching pad. We can extract little bits and pieces from these models and use that in our own model. They're also going to tell us a lot of information about, they're also going to tell us a lot about things that maybe we didn't consider. Now, I found this online through our search engine, and look at all these cool little gems and rubies kind of embedded in the actual chest itself. I didn't ever think about that when I first started that, and that's a cool idea. That may be something to think about and incorporate into our design. In addition to understanding the overall form, it's going to give us some lovely details that we can embed in the model. But I think probably most importantly, what the reference is going to give us is an understanding of the surface characteristics. As 3D modelers, we need to do two things primarily. We need to create the shape, but we also need to create the materials, the surface itself. What is our treasure chest made out of? Is it all wood? Is it all metal? Is it a hybrid between the two? Is it made out of gold? Is it made out of brass? I don't know. All decisions that we need to make, but the reference images will help us down that decision-making path. It also tells us a lot about weathering effects. It shows us how maybe some of these treasure chests have been influenced by their environment. So they're just a starting point. They give us a nice kind of launching pad to where we want to go. Now, this is a purse, I think, or something, so it's kind of silly, but I like this one because, if you look at the form of this, if you look at the overall shape, they got this lovely taper. It's not perpendicular. If you compare the bottom and the top of this object to, let's do this one down here, look how straight and perpendicular all of these planes and surfaces are to each other. It makes the treasure chest feel very grounded. It feels safe. It feels very secure. Okay. Now, if you were a carpenter, these are not bad words to describe your object. But as 3D modelers, as imagery specialists, our job is to create exciting objects for our audience to look at. We're advocates for our audience here. We want to make sure that what they're seeing is stimulating them on a subconscious level. We want them to be so intrigued and so curious about our object that it demands their attention. Having everything be perpendicular to each other, lots of 90-degree edges and planes who are parallel or perpendicular to each other, is boring. It's uninteresting. It doesn't include the sense of energy and excitement that we're really after. So I think my subconscious and my own creativity is really drawn to imagery like this, where it tapers up towards the top. It feels like it's exploding out of the ground, and it's drawing my attention, and it forces me to look into the interior of my treasure chest. These are the types of imageries and sculptures that we want to create. We want to captivate our audience. We want to grab their attention and say, hey, look at me. So think about proportion. Think about the role of all of these planes in reference to each other. 90-degree corners and perpendicular faces often make things feel a little too stable, a little too grounded. I don't want to use the word boring. Maybe the more appropriate word is uninteresting. There are no straight lines in nature. As human beings, I think it's natural for us to try to make everything, 90 degrees, and that comes from, the tools that we have access to inside of our 3D modeling applications. It's very easy to make things that are 90-degree angles and perpendicular from each other. But the really interesting shapes, the shapes that are memorable, the shapes that really captivate our attention, walk away from that idea. It's a little bit more difficult to model, but not impossible. Now that we have a really good understanding of what our reference kind of shows us, and a good concept here, I want to have this taper going from the bottom of my treasure chest all the way towards the top. For me personally, I think the treasure chests that have this cool curve is going to be kind of fun. So that's where I'm going to begin my modeling process. I'll start with the bottom, and then I'm going to flesh out the overall proportions here at the top. Let's jump over into Modo and start working. So welcome to Modo. This is the default installation of Modo, and as you can see, our OpenGL viewport is alive and ready to go. I'm chilling out in the modeling tab, and this is where we're going to be spending the overwhelmingly the majority of our time over the next couple of weeks. I want to make a couple tweaks to my OpenGL viewport to make it easier for me to see my model, and hopefully easier for you to see precisely what I'm doing. So a couple things that I'm going to initially change here. I'm going to turn off my grid. This is an intermediate modeling course, so you should have the basics of modeling in your back pocket. And I'm also going to turn off the visibility, not the influence, the visibility of our work plane. Our work plane is this light gray grid in the background of our environment. Now this kind of gets in the way. I like to be able to just exclusively focus and see my model. So I don't want anything else getting in the way of that. We don't necessarily need to see it because our compass way over here in the bottom left-hand corner of our scene is going to give us all the information that we need. Of course, we see the positive indicators of the X, Y, and Z axis. For me, these lines in our compass represent the location of all the positive values on each axis. But if you look here, this little light gray square in the center represents the current orientation of our work plane. So right now it's oriented along the XY axis, which is pretty cool. Now check it out. As I orbit down, you'll get to there it is. It just snapped. So they'll come to a point within inside of your scene where it will change. And now, if you look at our compass, we can see the current orientation of the of the work plane. It's along the XZ axis. So for me personally, because I'm really comfortable working inside of Modo, I don't necessarily need to see the work plane. So I'm going to turn it off in my visibility section of my viewport properties. The compass is always going to tell me the information that I need. My eye is always kind of cruising down to my compass as I start to work and flesh out these forms. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to do, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to see at home, is I want to turn off this grading in the background. I want to put my cursor in the OpenGL viewport, hit the O key to bring open the viewport properties. The drawing and control tab is going to give us the options that we're after and where we want to go into this GL background. And I want to turn it to none. Make it a little bit easier for you guys to see what's going on. Okay. The last thing that I want to do is a small little tweak. I've inserted just a unit primitive sphere just to give you a nice example of what I'm after. As 3D modelers, we're kind of like little digital sculptors, and oftentimes the wireframes on our model clouds our judgment. We stop seeing the overall form because the wireframes are just visually getting in the way. It kind of skews our perspective of what's actually happening on a form level. So here's what I want to do. I want to be able to go in and I want to turn off, interactively that is, the wireframe overlay color. Right now the default is set to colored. If we go to uniform, there it is, kind of a light gray, almost the exact same color as the fill color for our polygons. But ultimately, I want none. There it is. Now we can see our shape without our wireframes and get a much better understanding of what this thing looks like, okay? So ideally, the big goal here, what I'm trying to do, is that I want to toggle. I want to go from colored to none in just one button. Now, luckily, we have the beginning part of this already established with the keyboard shortcuts inside of Modo. If you hit the division key in your number pad, which is right next to the star key or the multiplications key, it's going to turn off your wireframes. But if you hit it again, nothing happens. They stay off. I want to bring my wireframes back. So let me show you how to create this. It's really, really super easy. It's going to involve a new little command, and I've given you this command inside of the content for this week's stuff. Here it is. This is all we need to do. So I'm going to copy this. And if you look at the command we're firing off, we're saying, hey, the 3D viewport, and then specifically the wireframe overlay mode is a value. And this question mark is going to be the big important one here. Is it none? So we're asking a question. Is it none or is it colored? Okay. So based on the conditions of the scene, one of these two values is going to be executed when I hit this key. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to pair that to an existing keyboard shortcut. If you go to the top of the screen where it says System, Input Editor, you're going to get this popover. Now, I'll admit, on the surface, this is a pretty overwhelming and kind of scary environment, but this kind of represents every single key binding inside the entire application, and it's overwhelming. But let me just show you where we're going. We're going to grab the little scroll bar, and we're going to go basically all the way down to the bottom, because at the bottom, we have all of the commands that are associated with our number pad. And there, let me zoom in so you guys can see what I'm doing. Here it is. This is the one that I want. So I'm just going to single kind of click pause to enter this field, and then paste in that command that I just copied from text edit. And now, if we return back to our OpenGL viewport, the division key in our number pad is going to give us the result that we're after. You're going to see me doing this a lot today. I like to turn off my wireframes and just look at the model. Okay, let's get modeling here, because now that we have set up our Modo and we're happy with the installation, or excuse me, in the setup of our work environment, let's start throwing down some polygons here. I'm going to pay real close attention to the orientation of my work plane in the compass, because I want to initially create the base of my model along the XZ plane. The work plane is a snapping guide. Literally almost every single tool inside of Modo reference the current orientation of the work plane, and I'm just going to left click and drag with my cube tool to start flushing out the shape. For me as a modeler, scale is a big thing. All the tools work better when we initially create our objects to scale. Our brain is going to be able to deconstruct and understand the volume that we're working within. So try to work in scale as much as you can. The real-world measurement system inside of Modo is fantastic. It's almost like a CAD program. It's really neat. We get to define things by their overall size and scale. This is something that we're really going to need to pay attention towards once we get into the texturing workflow, because the number of our displacement distances are going to kind of access that unit of measurement, that idea of scale and size. So if our model is already there, it's going to make the end result a little bit easier to get to. And it's kind of good practice too. It's kind of it's good form. This is one of the things that helps us earn our union card, as they say, because we model everything to scale. So we got to figure out what size we want to work with. Now, right now, I have my Modo preferences to have all of my units be in feet and inches. You can easily find that preferences that preference inside your global Modo preferences under the units category. I think I want to have this thing be, I don't know. I want it to be pretty big. So let's have it be 4 feet along the X, and then let's have it be 2.5 feet, or oops, excuse me. Let's see. That's a little too big, so let's just kind of eyeball it. Yeah, let's make it 36 inches. There we go. And what's 20 inches give us along the Z? Yeah, I'm happy with that. I think that's a good starting point. Again, this is a starting point. We're going to be painting with a broad brushstroke today. It's all about defining the overall shape first. In every sense, what we're trying to do right now is do a thumbnail sketch of our model. We want to try to create the overall shape as fast as we can with as few polygons. We don't want to start modeling all the detail because we don't even know what the overall shape looks like. Now, good modelers always do everything at the origin. So notice that I got that base polygon selected. I go to my basic tool tab, center selected all, and now that shape has been popped to the origin of the scene. I love it. Okay, now we can start extruding this and exploring the shape. So let's fire off the extrude tool. And again, I'm going to pay real close attention to all of my scale factors here. Let's do that. 20 inches high. Yeah, that's a good sized treasure chest. And as I'm looking at it, it doesn't look like it's big enough along the Z, so I'll just scale it out a little bit. This is the cool thing about working. Yeah, I'm liking that. That's much better. This is the great thing about working in these broad brushstrokes kind of a mentality. We're just looking at overall form. These changes are really easy to make on a surface that has only 6 polygons. Okay, I'm liking this. Now, if we go back to our reference images, I was talking about the idea of having these angles, having it taper out towards the top. So I'm going to hold down my middle mouse button, drag out a marquee selection box, and let's just explore that taper with the scale tool. Now, I don't want to go too extreme like that because that's just kind of cartoony and it doesn't necessarily look real. But a small little flare at the top I think will really, really be quite nice. Now, I was scaling this uniformly with the center indicator, so the light blue circle. So it scaled it along the X, Y, and Z axes simultaneously, which is what I wanted. Because if we look at this image from the side, yeah, that's why. Because I scaled it uniformly, I both made the taper along the X and the Z axis simultaneously. So we got a freebie taper over here. I know some of you guys are going to ask in the forums, so let me just kind of get you caught up to speed. I get a lot of questions. How do I get this little pie menu to show up, to flip my perspective of my scene in the OpenGL viewport? If you hold down the Control and Spacebar, you'll get this little popover, this little pie menu. Where your cursor ends up will determine which orientation or which view of your scene you'll execute when you let go of the keyboard shortcut. It's a really great way to fly around your scene. You're going to see me doing that a lot. The great thing about the Modo interface is that we don't have to have that traditional mod quad environment, right? We get to have this one massive viewport. The work plane gives us all the functionality that the mod quad kind of workflow needs. So this is going to be good. Okay, let's just explore, analyze. I'm liking the taper. That's pretty good. Now, this taper is going to be something that I'm going to value because I want to include that taper into the top as well. I don't want to lose that unique angle. Let's be good stewards. I'm going to go over to my item list, call this bottom, and then I want to add a new mesh item into the scene. I'll call this top, not toop. Let's get rid of that one there. There we go. I like segmenting things out into different layers. It allows me to isolate the geometry, work just on the polygons that I want to influence. And now we can start defining the top. Now, it makes sense to me that the top and the bottom share a consistent form. So I'm going to actually go back to my bottom, copy that polygon, and paste it into my top layer. There we go. Okay. I'm liking this. This is a good starting point. Now, I think I'm going to want to have, here's what I want to have. I want to have the top of my treasure chest fit over the bottom. So it's going to completely shut over it. That'd be kind of cool, like a chest actually would. So there's a couple ways we can get about doing this. Let me show you a landmine, something that people often kind of try. I'll just scale it up. I'll make it bigger, right? Now, this is not a bad idea, but look at the borders. Look at the borders here. You can see, because our bottom geometry is on its own mesh item, we can start to see the black wireframe of our bottom geometry inside of our OpenGL viewport. Now, this overhang here is desirable. That's what I'm after. but I'm kind of a control freak. I'm an OCD modeler. I pay attention to all of my borders. The border over here is not the same as it is over here. Now, there are ways, of course, you can just, select that top polygon, scale it along the z-axis to get it kind of close, but that's close, but I don't do close. I want exact. I would like to have a consistent loop of polygons traveling around the top of my treasure chest. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back in time a couple steps, and let's explore this. Go back in time. There we go. Okay, so now I'm back before I scaled it up. What if we did bevel? The bevel tool can be found in your basic category of tools. It can also be found in a couple other places, including the polygon section. So lots of places to get access to this tool. The keyboard shortcut is B, B as in boy, B as in bevel. And the bevel tool, once applied to our scene, of course allows us to shift up our polygon, which isn't what we want in this particular situation. We want to do an inset. Check it out. The inset value is going to give us precisely what we're after. It's grown that polygon uniformly, and now the distances between all of the corners and the edges of the bottom to the top are the same. Now, the unfortunate thing, and the piece that we need to consider and think about here, is what's happened. The bevel tool is always going to add geometry. If you look carefully underneath, we now have this loop of polygons, which isn't desirable. This isn't what we want, so I'm just going to so I got to do some edits here. Now, if I delete them, that would seem to work perfectly. Let's just double check. Yep, that seemed to work. Excellent. And now we have the good starting point for our top. Okay. So let's go ahead and start defining what this thing is going to look like. I think I'm going to initially do this with the extrude tool. Once again, and now I'm just looking at shape. I'm just looking at proportion. How tall do I want my treasure chest? That in there is not so bad. I like that a lot. Okay. This is looking good. Let's look at it from a multitude of views, and we're on our way. Okay, so we have some things that we want to change to our top now, because I mentioned earlier that I really want to have this cool angle in here. That'd be kind of fun. Let's explore how we can make this. As we go through this process, I want you to kind of approach this entire project with a healthy sense of exploration. Don't necessarily copy what I'm doing. You're going to learn more by applying these general ideas, by applying these strategies to your own design. Make your own treasure chest. Of course, you're more than welcome to follow along and do precisely what I'm doing. But if you make your own designs, you're going to learn more. Okay? And I'm really most committed to you guys learning this thought process, this idea. Okay. Because we have that angle already defined in here in the bottom, I'm just going to use my slicing tools to get the end result. I'm going to give a little overhang here, which is cool. That's fine. And then check it out. I'm just going to fire off my slice tools. You can find your slice tool under the mesh edit category of tools. Here it is right there, slice. And I'm just going to trace that angle. The slice tool is like a laser, and it's best used, in my opinion, inside these orthographic viewports. I've been working exclusively for the past couple seconds in the front view, and I can very clearly see the angle and how I'm slicing that object. Okay, excellent. Because I had my wireframes turned off, I didn't necessarily see the slice, but there it is. Okay, awesome sauce. I like that. That's looking pretty great. Now, let's look at it from the side before we go too much further. I think I'm going to do the same thing from the side. Grab that polygon, drag it out just to give me a little bit of overhang, fire off the slice tool, whose keyboard shortcut is Shift-C, by the way. You're going to see me doing that a lot. And then trace the angle with the purple indicator line. It's important that this little laser, this line, goes all the way through our mesh. If we terminate it in the center, that's bad. We're going to have a vert hanging in the center. So have it go all the way and pay real close attention. The angle doesn't need to be exact, but as close as you can make it in life is good. So this purple line, I haven't dropped the tool yet. That represents the slice, okay? Represents the laser. It's a little bit more difficult to understand the role of these planes in 3D. It kind of doesn't work for my brain. But if it works for you, I'm happy. Whatever makes it easy. Okay, let's start deleting stuff here. And we'll start getting a better understanding of how this all looks. Okay, I want to fill these gaps just using the bridge command. You can find the bridge under duplicate bridge. There we go. Boom. I'll do the same thing for the front just to close the openings so we can take a really good look at what we got. Now, my brain is only focusing exclusively on this half. We haven't done anything over here because the big picture idea is that this is going to be a symmetrical object, okay? No sense in creating the entire thing. We only really need to create about half. In actuality, if you think about it, the left half is identical to the right half, and then if we look at it from the right, the front is going to be the same as the back. So we only really need to evaluate about 25% of the design. I'm leaving the rest in here just for simplicity's sakes. But if it makes it easier for you, you certainly could slice around the origin and start to chop this stuff up. Okay, let's look at what we got here. Yeah, I'm liking this. This is awesome. This is starting to look pretty cool. Okay, this is starting to look very cool, actually. Let's look at it again from the front. Grab the wrong polygon. I'm looking at the wrong side. There we go. Okay, so we have some work in here that we need to do. Okay, which is just fine. I think I'm not too pleased with the overhang over here, so I'll just grab the move tool and do that. Just move it out. I want to try to create that overhang. It's going to help me evaluate how this whole thing is working. Yeah, and same with this front face. Just move it out. I'm just using this as a process of evaluation. Okay, cool. Now from the front, I'm liking this. I like that taper out there. It makes it feel like it's growing from the earth. I like that a lot. I think that's going to be a neat feature for our model. So I'm going to keep this angle the same. Because I sliced it precisely, check it out. This angle here, and let me just grab my bottom one. Those are identical. That's good for us, okay? Even though we want to have these kind of unique angles, there should be a consistency within the angles itself. That's good design. Let's look at it from the side. We need some love, okay? We need to work on this a little bit because I like how it looked. The profile looked from the front, but over here, I think I want to change a little bit. I'm not too thrilled with the width of the top. So if let me just grab that edge, scale it down a little bit. Let's just play around with this idea. Too steep, not steep enough. If you look at the reference, some of the treasure chests had some lovely kind of curved edges up here, and I think that's really ultimately where I want to go. So let me just kind of block out the overall shape of this thing first. I'm looking at proportions now, just looking at how it feels. And let's just give this a try. Okay, I'm at the point within my own creative process now that I'm interested in seeing what it looks like on the opposite side of the x-axis. Let's just do it real quick, okay? Make sure everything is dialed. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to turn my grid back on. Visibility, show grid, okay? And now I'm going to enable our snapping engine. Our snapping engine inside of Modo is fantastic. However, please note that it is a global engine. It's literally going to influence every single object inside of our entire scene. So let's turn it on. Now, once it's on, we get access to all of our snapping options down over here. Notice that the snapping option button has a keyboard shortcut of F11. And I'm going to do a little grid snapping. These are all the different elements that we can snap to. We'll talk about some of these a little bit more in detail later. But for right now, we're just going to do grid snapping. And we're going to fire off the slice tool, Shift-C, and check it out. You can see that little blue cross. Let me zoom in so you guys can see it. See that little blue cross? That's a snap highlight. That shows me exactly which elements I'm going to snap to if I was to click down right now. And I'm just going to zoom, laser cut it down the center of the Z. I'll go to the front. I'll do it again, Shift-C once again, and laser cut it down here in the front. Because I'm using the grid snaps, and because I've spent so much time and energy ensuring that all of my objects and my geometry were centered around the origin of the scene, I know with confidence that this is precisely where I want it to be. Okay, so now I'm free to delete all that. Don't need it. And let's do, went to the wrong perspective. I'm also going to delete this half because these are the planes that I've been focusing on. Yeah, and let's just kind of take a look at what this is going to look like when we mirror it. So we get an overall thumbnail sketch. Now, I'm still in the duplication series of tools in my toolbar, and this is the command mirror. I'm in a component selection section of polygons. I want to turn off my snapping engine. However, I am going to turn on the origin action center. And now I'm just going to click in the viewport to start mirroring my shapes. There we go. This is just thumbnails, so don't worry about the actual polygonal structure of this. And then I'll do it one more time going across the x-axis to get the overall shape. Yeah, I'm liking this. This is looking pretty good. I'm overall generally quite pleased with what I've crafted so far. As a sculptor, I'm always kind of cruising through and looking at the totality of the shape. Let's turn off our wireframes, get a good understanding of what this thing looks like. The curved top is going to be something quite nice. I'm going to like that a lot. Yeah, I'm very, very pleased. That's going to be a fun shape when it's all done. From the front, interesting profile. From the side, once we have the high resolution geometry that creates that nice curve, that'll be kind of fun. I think this is going to be an interesting shape to build from. Okay, so now that our thumbnail sketch is done, we can advance on to the next stage of the 3D modeling pipeline. You always want to start with very simple, low-resolution geometry initially. It takes, if I wasn't instructing you guys and talking you through my thought process as I was going through this stage, it would have taken me, 5 minutes to come to this conclusion. And now I've made all the tough, creative decisions first. I understand the totality and the volume that this space is going to kind of participate within, and I have a really good understanding of the basic size and proportions of the major angles of my little treasure chest. If you do this initially, it's going to save you a lot of edit time. So this is now going to be the base mesh, the base model that I'm going to begin to build from in the next series of tutorials. So next week, we're going to take this shape and we're going to up-res it. We're going to create new geometry, but we're going to use this as the template, if you will, when creating the overall proportions of our treasure chest. If you have any questions on this process, feel free to ask me during the in the forums online. Be more than happy to help you get to your final result. As a reminder, don't just build mine. Don't build my treasure chest. Build your own treasure chest. Explore it. Understand the form and the volume. From this exploration, you'll create something that's really kind of special and unique and kind of fun. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.